Cool. Thank you. First of all, I don't have any giveaways, unfortunately, but that was a very great talk, and I would like to have this planet as well. But, I hope you're still up and I hope you're still motivated for the next talk on sustainability. I'll be talking about greenwashing, and let's get straight into it. I would like you to take a look at this beautiful collage over here and ask for yourself maybe how could you determine which one of those certification of those claims might hint at greenwashing. Maybe you've got some pre-knowledge, maybe you've seen some of those certificates or slogans already. I look at many question marks. Don't worry, I'm not going to pick anyone out. I just want you to reflect on it and to think maybe how could we detect greenwashing? So the disappointing answer is, I don't know. This is just a random selection of logos, and I can't tell you today how we can detect greenwashing from a consumer's point of view. But I would rather tell you from the other way around, how can we as designers prevent greenwashing through good business design? My name's Alex. I'm a business designer at Denkwerk, located in Cologne. I'm part of a service and experience design team. And I would like to show you 5 statements today on greenwashing, which hopefully inspire you on how you can apply design methods to avoid greenwashing from the beginning on. And in the end, you will get some shiny practical cases, which are hopefully nice. Not as nice as the IKEA one, but hopefully also quite nice. Cool. So there are many different definitions about greenwashing. I quite like that one. An unsupported claim to deceive consumers into believing that a company's products are environmentally friendly or have a greater impact than what it is true. So it's generally about deceiving customers, about telling something, make them believe something which is not actually true. And most people, when talking about greenwashing, think about bold lies, like something that is obviously wrong, like saying we're in Munich, but we're actually in Berlin. But there are actually more shades of greenwashing that we need to be aware of, something like vague claims. If you say something like the product is eco-friendly, what does that even mean? Or something, I'm not trying to bash any company, so I try to anonymize everything. If you say sweetness from natural sources, that could mean anything, right? Everything might be from natural sources, more or less. So that's something we need to be aware of. What do those expressions actually mean? The next step on the kind of greenwashing scale would be cherry-picking data. So creating a false balance between this huge pool of information that you have within a business model, and you pick single information out and communicate them to the consumers, make them believe that this is actually important. Like if you sell bottles 15% less plastic, what does that mean? How much plastic did you use before? Is it a good KPI? What's the legal regulation? No one actually knows. So you pick one number and present it to the consumer and overemphasize partial aspects of your business model. The next one would be exaggeration. So companies deliberately distort and miscommunicate the impact of their actions. For example, this is the only German word I'm using, I promise. 100% Ökostrom, so 100% green energy. So there was this discussion that if you use at least 60% green energy, you can still label it as 100%, even though there's 40% coal-based energy in it. So that's just an exaggeration of what you're actually doing, and consumers might believe, okay, I'm actually doing 100% good. And of course, the pinnacle of everything would be false claims, labeling a product or service in an incorrect way. Lowest fares, the lowest emission. This refers to an airline. Maybe they do have the lowest fares, but of course they're still using the same planes as others. So they obviously don't have lower emissions. They also got punished for this. And as you can see, of course, it's all very nice and green. So we believe they are all very, very sustainable. So the first statement I want to make is greenwashing has become the new normal. It's not something that some companies do with bold lies that you can clearly distinguish. If you go to a supermarket, if you look on the internet, see digital ads, almost every ad includes something with sustainability, claims like pro-planet, we are supporting the nature. So just be aware of this, and I would say not 1 out of 10 products is using this, but maybe 7 or 8 out of 10 products are using at least vague claims or cherry picking data. So as a business designer, I was wondering, how can that be? What's the process behind it? So this is a very common tool we're using, a classic strategy canvas that some of you might know. So it's about finding out what are the competitive factors in the market that determine why a consumer is buying. And that's something we should use as a strategic tool before building the business model. So we take a look at the market, compare the different competitors. For example, competitor A is very good at convenience because they invested a lot into service or into logistics. Or competitor B is very good at exclusiveness because they have a certain supply chain. They have certain suppliers who give them exclusive products that only they can offer. So we try to find gaps in the market and then develop a business model to create a USP in a certain gap. But this tool is often misused as a marketing tool. So we identify a gap after building the business model and say, whoa, there's a gap in the market for sustainability. Let's position here. So it's used as a positioning map and not for creating a competitive advantage, because a competitive advantage always needs to be covered by resources. I can't just say we're the cheapest one, so we might be an 8 at price, but in the end we don't have a cost advantage in our supply chain or our production scale. So this is the same for sustainability. We can't just say, so we're a 9 here, but we don't cover it with the resources behind it. That's probably because sustainability has become a buzzword, and we need to unbuzz the word and think, what is actually the advantage we are doing or we are having? What are we doing better than our competitors? And one aspect, of course, is reducing waste. That might be a pain point that we tackle as a business, and that we could be better than competitors. So we have to think, how can we be better than the others in reducing waste? And this connects well to the talk before. So we could say, as a business designer, we could create a circular business model in order to make the waste reusable and to expand the lifespan of the product. So this might be a clear resource that solves a real problem. So that would justify why we have an 8 on the sustainability scale, whereas others have a 3 or 2. So unbuzzing the buzzword, actually question, what does sustainability mean and how can we deliver pain relievers in this regard? So sustainability must be strategic, not a marketing decision. If it becomes a marketing decision, we're looking at our business model afterwards and try to find reasons to justify why we're sustainable. Oh, look, we're using paper bags now and we're losing 15% less of plastic, so we can communicate that we're the most sustainable ones. But if we start in the beginning with a proper business design process, or generally with a strategic process, we develop our business model in the right way. So I already said there's a difference between micro actions and strategic value proposition. The example I said before, if you are a huge supermarket chain and you substitute your plastic bags through paper bags, it's a good thing, but it's a micro action. Same with solar panels. If you install solar panels on your rooftops, it's a good micro action, but it's not a strategic value proposition. So it doesn't create a green business model. And if you actually have a systematic sustainable advantage, so a sustainable advantage that is covered by actual resources behind it, it's the biggest asset a brand can have these days. And we as an agency are always very thankful if we have clients who actually have resources that make them more sustainable than others, because it makes the communication and everything you work from that point on so much easier. So our motivation as business designers is to create those sustainable advantages through business design. It's actually a quote by myself. I tried to find a more popular one, but I once wanted to quote myself. So my statement is not every brand can or must have a green USP, because it seems nowadays that every company wants to be the green player in the market, and that's why they communicate their micro actions. But we as consultants need to make them understand not everyone must have a green USP. And it's also a different process designing a normal business model and designing a green business model. I will get to that in a moment. And I quite like the idea of the donut economy. I don't know how popular it is among service designers. Who has heard of it before or who knows it? Oh, almost everyone. Okay, maybe half of it. I can't really see a lot, but cool. Yeah, to summarize it, it's basically a concept by Kate Raworth, which gives a critical view on our growth economy by stating that there are boundaries on both sides of our economy. So on the upper crust of this donut, there are the planetary boundaries, such as land use change, climate change, freshwater use. And on the inner circle, there are social boundaries like health, food, also jobs, equality, resilience. So if we move into one direction from our safe and just space, so if we maximize one size, it usually leads to the effect that the other side is suffering. So for example, if we are expanding our wealth and if we're creating more jobs and more food, it goes at the expense of the planet. On the other way around, if we go back in time before industrialization and we would live like in the 1500s again, it would go at the expense of the social welfare. And at the same time, of course, it would create more sustainability. But what I want to say is we have to create a balance between those two dimensions. And the two takeaways from this concept for me is there are clear boundaries that we move in without our economy, and planet, or if you do something for the planet, it's not necessarily for the people. So it's a kind of dilemma between those two dimensions and sometimes even a trade-off. That's why I'm not a big fan of this visualization either. So we all know the 3 design thinking principles, and I've seen it quite often that sustainability has been added as a kind of 4th overlapping principle. So it's a kind of underlying aspect that you consider within every step of the process. But this also means that we don't treat it as a separate discipline. So we suggest that if you do something desirable and you think of the consumer, you should also have in the back of your mind that it should be sustainable somehow. But it denies the fact that I mentioned before, that sometimes, or that sustainability in general is not necessarily desirable. So something that is sustainable in most cases is not nice for the people. It's not convenient. It's not something that improves our life. At first place, it's something hard to take, and it's also not profitable. So we should treat this dimension, if we decide to go for green business model, as a discipline on eye level, and need to think about what are things we can do for the planet, what are things for the other dimensions, and then we need to find the sweet spot. But we also need to be aware that most ideas during an ideation that we have in terms of sustainability will be outside of the other circles, because it's not the nicest solution for our consumers and not the most business-oriented solution. So how does it look in practical terms? That's the typical process we go through as business designers. So we're building an MVP, we build hypotheses, we test them, we learn from it, and we adapt our MVP. So usually we are writing hypotheses about desirability and talk to consumers. Is that really a problem? Do we solve it with our product? Maybe yes, maybe no. We do hypotheses about viability, do a revenue stream calculation or cost plan. We do hypotheses about the feasibility, so we collaborate with programmers to build a prototype and see if it's actually possible, do a legal check, for example. But have you ever built hypotheses on sustainability? So have you actually mapped down what are the hypotheses we're making on sustainability and how can we test it and how can we validate if it's actually true or if it's false? So if we actually treat these 4 dimensions on the same level, we should also make hypotheses about sustainability and treat it the same way. So I think we've already seen quite a few nice examples how to integrate the planet as a co-client when designing a service or product. I have another attempt, and I'm glad it's not overlapping with the previous talk. Maybe you're familiar with the value proposition canvas. So it's basically showing what are pains and gains on the consumer side and how are we facing it with our gain creators and pain relievers. But if we really want to make the planet our co-client and treat it like a stakeholder, like a person, and I really like this word, co-client, we should also think separately what are his or her or their jobs and what are their gains and pains. For example, reducing CO2, reducing waste, saving water and other resources. So we really should treat it as a proper stakeholder. I actually wanted to give the same example from the Apple ad, but no, this is taken already. But I think it's nice to just visualize it as a person in front of you and think, what are the planet's pains and how can we face it with gain creators and pain relievers on the business model side? So the most important takeaway for me in this regard is sustainability does not necessarily equal customer centricity. Sustainability can be completely uncomfortable, and our task is to find the sweet spot and to find a business model combining all of the dimensions and bring it into balance. So let's think a little bit about how to communicate this to clients, because I've heard it a lot on this conference already that it's important to speak the client's language. That, for example, in this regard, we shouldn't draw the whole dystopian picture and talk about like the political perspective, how icebergs are melting, how polar bears are dying. This is the peak of everything. This is the last step of a long chain of actions that we try to avoid, but it's very not concrete for clients because we need to imagine they have certain business goals. They have to think in terms and in years, and we need to think about how can we motivate them to avoid greenwashing and to go into green business modeling. And therefore, I think it's more effective to think about the business effects that greenwashing has on their business potentially. For example, reputation risk. If you think about shitstorms, about customers leaving, about lack of trust in the brand, which is a very grave effect. Regulatory risks, of course. So we are always argumenting that the regulations will get stricter and stricter. I think that's a clear tendency. And if you can decide if you want to be a first mover and want to be up there, want to be ready for these regulations, or if you want to be a late mover and just react to what's happening. And the third one would be litigation risk, so getting sued by others, by contract partners, by third parties, which is actually also a serious risk if you make false claims, for example. So those would be recommendations to communicate to clients, so give reasons to act from within the system. We're not politicians, we are consultants. We have to have this business mindset as well and think of what does the client have in the end when investing into sustainability and not into greenwashing. So what we as business designers do, like most creative people, is we take micro patterns from other business models, such as subscription models, razor and blade models, and we try to apply it to new fields and see if it's working, if it's probably better than the previous business model. So I had a look at those micro patterns in the sustainable world, and I tried to categorize them and see how can we get a bit of structure into those different kinds of sustainable business models. And I think there are 4 different dimensions that we can get active with. The first one would be to decide whether we want to incentivize industry and politics. So that could be a business case to develop business models that put pressure or incentives on this side of the chain, or we can say we want to influence consumer choices. I will give a few more examples in a minute, but just to understand this matrix. And on the other hand, we can decide whether we want to acquire resources. So that might be money or that might be votes in order to drive change, or we can substitute an existing product through sustainable design. So I try to analyze different sustainable business models and categorize them on this pattern and think about what might be patterns that suit to resource acquisition. That might be crowdfunding, something I came across quite often. Compensation, upselling, green petitions. So if your business model is to collect votes for sustainable purposes, or also co-creation to integrate consumers into the designing process. And I brought a few examples that suit this kind of micro pattern. For example, I don't know if someone knows crowd farming. That's a startup. Oh yeah, I actually have never used it, to be honest, but I try to explain it as good as possible. So you can actually support farmers by investing, for example, I think into a piece of land, or you can so many people invest into one farmer and can then get the fruits or vegetables out of it on a regular basis. So you have a new business model for this farmer, and you can actually, as a platform, profit from it as well. Ecosia, I think, is quite well known. So it substitutes Google and takes the revenues to plant trees. So it's actually their value proposition. We are more sustainable than others because we plant trees, and therefore we maybe invest less into development. Of course, Google has a huge model and a huge system behind it, but this sustainable advantage is reason enough for many users, such as me, to use Ecosia instead. Bettervest is a green investment platform. So also this is used to acquire resources, financial resources for sustainable companies and startups. So it's a green investment platform. So the next dimension would be product design. So substituting old non-sustainable products through more sustainable ones. By using, for example, circularity, we've just seen it, green razor and blade model. So razor and blade means you've got a quite cheap basic product, and you upsell the blades. Like, for example, if you buy a printer and I don't know the English word, you have to buy Patronen to refill it, and they are very expensive. So you can also do that with green products. You have to buy a cheap razor, and you can instead of throwing it away, you can replace the blade, so the complementary product, through sustainable products. Sharing models is quite well known, I think, so to use certain products together, smart maintenance, digital twins. So this is, of course, because we're in digital agencies, quite focused on digital business models. So how can we use platforms and technology to drive change? Digital twins might be used to replace physical products and make virtual tests without using actual resources. So examples in this regard are Vital, which is a startup from Cologne, actually, and they have an app where you can get like reusable cups and reusable bowls, and you can just exchange them at the restaurants. So it's a reuse system combined with a digital app. Too Good To Go is also a digital platform which saves food that usually would be thrown away. So you can connect consumers to share their food. And Cabify is an app which enables people to share rides together. So a little bit like Uber, but on a more community-oriented way. Yeah, so those would be approaches to shape sustainable products in a digital way. Third dimension, industry incentivation. So I said we can decide if we want to pressure, if we want to motivate the industry. And most examples I've seen are certifications, because companies always love certifications. If you couldn't put your badge on the website, B Corp would be an example. So you do an assessment, and in the end you can say, oh, we're certified by B Corp, and can communicate it to the people. But it actually drives the companies to be more sustainable and to think about all the different aspects of sustainability. Another example I brought from our own agency is Polymer. So we had a project where a platform for what's the word again? Kunststoffe. Yeah, sorry? Polymers, yeah, that's the word, sorry. Polymers are, so they wanted to match consumers with suppliers of polymers, and actually quite close to the name. So we changed the business model towards a more sustainable way, and we said you need to focus on recyclable materials, and we created an extra value in the business model by making consumers, or by enabling consumers to type in, it's very complicated to explain, but to type in polymers and see what the recyclable material could be. So there was a little extra twist to facilitate this process of substituting polymers through recycled materials. So that would be an example of facilitating the change. And the last one, consumer choice influence, is probably the most popular one, because it's consumer facing. We get confronted with it every day. For example, sustainable curation, if you have a platform with only sustainable products, if you sell transparency, or if you incentivize consumers, for example, through loyalty programs. Olio would be nice example, or Radbonus. It's actually also a startup from Cologne, and they acquired companies to pay money for private bike riders to ride their bike. So you were incentivized when you rode your bike, and for every 10 kilometers, you got a little bonus, for example, a discount on certain restaurants or for certain brands. So that was quite a nice way to use digital platforms to bring together the industry and consumers, and actually influence the consumer choice on using the bike. The last example will be Tony's Chocolonely. It's a chocolate brand, and they're using blockchain to track down where your products come from. So you can have a total transparency, and you can see where your chocolate has been made. So this is also kind of transparency selling, and some people might decide for Tony's Chocolonely because of this sustainable advantage. Okay, I hope I got all the startups more or less right, and I could give you a small introduction to this, to these clusters. And I would like to show you again the few takeaways. So sustainability must be a strategic, not a marketing decision. Not every brand can or must have a green USP. Very important to also stress that in front of clients. Sustainability does not always equal customer centricity. So of course we need to find the sweet spot between both, but during ideation processes there will be ideas that are sustainable, there will be ideas that are customer centered, and in the beginning it's normal that they are not the same, that they are serving different dimensions. We need to give reasons to act within the system. So we're not political leaders, we are consultants, we're designers. And we should adapt the methods as seen in the talk before, or also for the value proposition canvas. Maybe you got some inspiration, and hope to hear from you, hope to get some questions, and thank you very much.